So you see how they introduced the interview between Bouncer and Striker.
Mm.
Did that help DigDat's case, or did it make it worse? The girl, Yasmin Martins. Who was her mother giving evidence for?
But then he realised, I think, how badly he was injured, and he just drove round and came back to where he parked in the first place.
Was DigDat using legal aid? Let's talk about DigDat now, because that's just the main case that right now. That's the hot topic. Well, not right now, but that's what's been the hot topic. He's going to be sentenced soon. They said it was a later date. So how does that even work when they say we're going to sentence him at a later date? When do they come up with a date? How's the date even,
Well, I think he has got other proceedings against him later in the year. So it will depend on the outcome of that trial. It's a bit like KO. In that case, he wasn't sentenced for quite a long time after he was found guilty, because one of his co-defendants, there was a hung jury and they had to have a retrial, and it took a long time before they eventually said, right, okay, now we can get a sentencing. So it can be surprisingly long time.
Yeah.
But especially when they know he's going to get a long time anyway. It's not as if he's going to be in, whatever time he serves on remand in custody now, he's going to come off his eventual sentence. So
yeah. How long do you reckon they'll give him?
I was having this discussion with somebody the other day who ex-police officer, and he was going for a higher figure than I was sort of leaning more to sort of 15 to 20 years, and he was saying, no, I think it might be 25 plus, So.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
What makes you think it'll be 15 to 20 based on what you've seen before?
I think I'm wrong. I think I think you're probably going to be right, because it was a shooting with like 8 bullets, 6 hit him, and really could easily have died. So it could have been a murder charge. That sort of aggravate, that sort of shooting in public, pretty indiscriminate, could easily have hit somebody else. I think.
Okay, and I've got a few questions about the case as well. 2 questions that have been on my mind and I've been waiting to ask you in person, because you're going to know the answer to these things. So you see how they introduced the interview between Bouncer and Striker, and they showed that in court. Did that help DigDat's case, or did it make it worse?
Well, the jury obviously convicted him. Whether it sort of went on the balancing scales and might have helped him a bit, I don't know if it played much of a it seemed at the time when they made it, when they decided it was going to be admissible, it seemed that it would help him, because obviously in that, Striker is saying that he wasn't the shooter. He says, I saw who did it, and it wasn't him. I was amazed when the police charged him, and you think, well, if the victim says that you've got the wrong man, then the jury's going to think, well, why are we going to convict him? But
wouldn't the jury be thinking, this guy's just traumatized?
Yeah.
This guy's clearly just, they'd probably think, because the way he said it, the way it came off in the interview, I think the jury might have taken it as, this guy's definitely just doesn't want to snitch.
Well, it was when I spoke to the prosecutor, she sort of said that what had actually, she then insisted that they played the other video, which was in which he had basically, that was one where he sort of talking to the camera.
Oh, that one where he describes the experience.
He describes the actual shooting.
Yeah.
And there's quite a lot of factual errors in it. He's talking about he's talking about the shooters shooting out the tyres on his car, and then he claims that they both sort of collided, the 2 cars, and neither of those are true.
Oh.
So basically, her point was, well, obviously his memory of the event was not right. So he might have thought he might have thought he saw the shooter and it wasn't DigDat, but clearly his whole memory of the night was not reliable. He'd been shot in the head apart from anything else, and was in a coma for several days or weeks.
Yeah, it was mad.
So that does that. What that does to his memory, I don't know. But
yeah, and also another one, the girl Yasmin Martins. Who was her mother giving evidence for?
I believe she was called as I think she was a prosecution witness.
Okay, I knew it.
Yeah,
I knew it. Now my conscience is wiped off because I didn't want to, I didn't want to imply that, but I thought that's what happened. I didn't think it would make. I didn't think it would make any sense for DigDat to have called her to, her mother to give him a statement. You know what I mean?
No, I think I might be wrong, but I think that was the case. I mean, the defense might have called her if the prosecution hadn't anyway. But yeah, that was all very strange because DigDat didn't make a statement. He went no comment the whole way through. He didn't give a prepared statement. He didn't give evidence. And the only sort of indication we've got about what his defense might have been was this question asked to the mother. Do you remember him coming across and picking up his, chain on that night? Arriving in the middle of the night and saying, "Oh, I've left a chain here and I need to collect it." And, that was apparently his alibi. But, if that's your alibi, why don't you go in the dock and say that? So it was a very strange case.
The word is it wasn't DigDat who even shot him.
No, well, there was other people in the car. There was, so who knows? Who knows what really happened that night?
Yeah, no one actually knows apart from them.
No, exactly. But it was, it sounds like a bizarre, the whole thing. I remember him, he was shot several times, and then they drove off, and then he, probably panicking, Stryker, he starts his car up and starts driving around the streets, and he's probably thinking, "I've got to get away from him," sort of thing. But then he realised, I think, how badly he was injured, and he just sort of drove round and came back to where he parked in the first place, and then sort of staggered into his flat or his mum's flat, and that's where they found him on the sofa, covered in blood.
It's a miracle he survived that, isn't it?
Yeah, and not only survived it, but survived it really quickly. It was quite. Those first videos he did on YouTube were, only a month or two after the shooting. I mean, he had a big scar on his head, but he otherwise looked, pretty untouched. So maybe it's not surprising that he thought he'd been saved by God.
Yeah, and they didn't mention anything about a stolen chain in court. What caused this? Because I think in your Substack I saw you said that oftentimes they don't need to prove intent for things like this. Is that true?
Yeah, it can be quite annoying when you're trying to report a case and you're trying to zhuzh it up, especially for the public, people reading my Substack or whatever. I'm thinking, they want the juice. Why did this happen? What was it all about? But the prosecutor, he's just trying to get that person convicted, and he just needs, to prove that person, did. There was enough evidence to say that they did it. He doesn't need to prove why. So quite often they just completely leave out all sorts of stuff about gang affiliations or drill videos that might have triggered it, or chains that were stolen, or Instagram influencers who might have been involved. If it's irrelevant to proving his guilt, then they will leave it out.
So let's say the rest of their evidence is kind of weak. Would they be able to use that to strengthen their case, or is that not able to? Does it have no effect on the case?
I mean, sometimes I think they bring it in to try to sort of gild the lily kind of thing to sort of make it look a bit more. When maybe they think in the jury are thinking, why was this? What I need to know what was it all about. They might bring in a bit of evidence to prove that this person had a grudge. They had a grudge against each other. They might sort of show videos of, people slagging each other off, that sort of thing. But
And one more thing as well about this DigDat case, which everyone's been asking. All right, was DigDat using legal aid?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it wouldn't have been revealed in court. He had a very good barrister, Casey. But whether she was paid for by you and me or whether he paid for her, I don't know. Yeah.
Because is it true because the prosecutor was KC that even if he was on legal aid, which we don't know, his counsel would have to be KC if it was legal aid?
Yeah, basically, yeah. In most, well, all murder cases, or that was a conspiracy to murder, but that was attempted murder. So, but in those cases, yeah, it's a KC against KC. It's not, you have to have or silk as they call it. So otherwise it would just look unfair, I guess, if you had somebody who's better than the other guy, or woman. Yeah,
it was two women going against each other.
Yeah, that was completely. Well. Yeah. Everybody was a woman. The judge was a woman. The prosecutor was a woman. The defense. Yeah.
And a lot of people as well, because I think a lot of people don't understand why your job is so important, what you do is so important. Because in the UK, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I think they trialed allowing cameras in courts a couple years ago, but I don't think they're really any closer to allowing that to happen. So
no, they're only allowed for sentencing. And then it's they keep very closely on the judge. They don't sort of pan around, show the rest of the court.